Hi you guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I made this graduation cap cake and how I got this deep blue sparkly finish on it. Okay, so that top tier, so it was actually a 4-tier cake, and the top tier was the graduation cake tier. So I baked that cake in a Wilton sports ball pan, a 6-inch hemisphere pan, basically. Okay, so here's the pan I baked it in, here's the cake. And this is how I leveled the cake by just leaving it in the pan and just using my serrated knife and just cutting off that top edge. Okay, then I flipped it over, wrapped it in my saran wrap, and put it in the fridge or freezer until I was ready to use it. Okay, now I'm ready to put it together. I'm going to put some buttercream on my 6-inch cake card here. You could absolutely tort this 6-inch half sphere. I didn't because I had so much cake in this project. We actually didn't even end up eating this top tier. We just didn't need it. But you can tort this first, fill it, and then put it on this cake card. Absolutely no problem at all. Just tort and fill as you normally would any cake. And add some buttercream to the bottom of your cake card there, center your cake on top of it, and then just follow all the next steps um, as you'll see in a minute. But again, you can absolutely tort that and fill it if you'd like to do that. Okay, so now I am using my handy little bench scraper there to clean up my area, and I've got my turntable by Innovative Sugarworks, which I absolutely love, by the way, my very favorite turntable. And adding my buttercream, actually using the easy Swiss meringue buttercream recipe that I have on the website. I use for almost every single cake project because it's so ridiculously easy to make and it's so gourmet tasting. Um, and it works for just everything I need it to work for. So it's so versatile. So that's what I'm using for this project. Okay, so I'm just adding my buttercream onto my cake. If you know me, you know I normally use the Wilton cake icer tip to add my buttercream on, but I was lazy this day, so I just got my angled spatula here and I'm just getting her on. I'm spending way too much time getting her on because I don't normally do it this way. So yeah, sometimes it's better to not be lazy and just do it how you normally do. But whatever, it doesn't really matter for this project, which is why I didn't get out the cake icer tip because this does not need to be perfect. Now I'm using my Innovative Sugarworks acetate smoother here, which is basically bendable plastic, and that's what I use when I need to ice smoothly a round tier because you can bend it and hold it at the side of the cake like so and scrape off your excess icing that way. Now I could bend it even a little bit more, but I do not need to get this cake perfectly smooth and round underneath my fondant because we're actually going to be doing some things to the fondant to make it look like it's actually on somebody's head so that it's a little bit more realistic instead of perfectly round. So I'm not worried about getting this perfect, right? I'm actually going to leave the lines in and everything. We're not going for perfectly smooth here. Just getting the excess icing off. You can add more on if you want. I probably took a little bit too much off. But again, I wasn't worried so much about this particular cake tier for my full cake project. But you could add more icing on, doesn't matter. Just get it generally round. Okay. Now, you do not even have to put that cake in the refrigerator and chill it. I normally do for every single cake tier that I cover in fondant, but I didn't this time because I actually want to manipulate the fondant right after I add it over top. So I did not want my cake to be cold in this particular case, so I didn't do that. So I've rolled out my fondant like normal. If you need any tips on covering a cake in fondant, go over to the fundamentals course on cakeheads.com. I show you all the ins and abouts of covering fondant, all the tips, everything you need to know. Okay, I'm using this round acetate smoother again bendable plastic. This is one of my very favorites to use. And this is how I cut the edge. I just kind of lean over, press down into the fondant, holding this round smoother up next to my cake without pushing it into the cake and causing any marks, mind you. And I just kind of do that around the edge of the cake. You don't have to. I mean, there are many other ways that you could do this, but this, I just normally do this with every cake tier, so I was in autopilot here and doing it for this one as well. You could also prop your cake up on a soup can and just use a straight edge around, the bottom cardboard edge of the cake. That's an easy way to do it as well. Lots of ways you could do it. Okay, and then I take my fondant off and I'm just kind of fixing up those edges so that they're not messed up. And then we can move on to the next part. Okay, but you can see the cake is pretty smooth at this point, even though I wasn't going for that. It's pretty smooth. So if you did want to leave it just smooth like this, you could absolutely do that. I'm also just using that smoother to just make sure that I'm not seeing the cardboard along the bottom edge of my cake. Just kind of using it to kind of smooth out that bottom edge. Okay, now I have one of these little tools. The other side is a stitching tool. That side I just showed you is just round, but it's like a rolly, like a mini pizza cutter sort of thing. I'm going to use both sides for this project. So I'm taking this, not the stitching edge, but just the round edge, the pizza cutter edge, and I'm pushing it into, off camera, of course, for a moment, but here we're back. Pushing it into the bottom edge. So I'm just creating, I just want it to look like a seam, basically, real quick, nothing fancy, just pushing it in. I'm leaving about a quarter of an inch on the bottom there and just going all the way around to make it look like the seam of the cap. I really wanted to just make this grad cap a little bit different than the norm and make it look like it was actually on somebody's head. So this is what I thought would look kind of cool. So I'm creating that seam on the bottom. And then I'm using the stitching side. I switched the edges and I am looking at the front of my cake now, and I am starting at the bottom center and I am going up. I'm going to go through the center of the cake. So if you're not good at eyeballing things, then first find that center so you know where to go to. I'm just eyeballing this, and I'm usually actually not very good at that. So, hallelujah, it turned out. But I did find the center and went all the way over the top and down the back. Because in a real grad cake, there is a seam like that. I'm sorry, not a real grad cake, a real grad cap. There's an actual seam like that. I'm actually looking at a picture that I found online of somebody wearing a grad cap. And so now I have my color shaper here, and I have the pointy one, and it is a size 10 and the soft version of the color shaper. And I am just looking at that picture online and trying to find, where I see kind of little divots in the hat while it's on somebody's head. I'm just kind of making little divots into my fondant. This is why I didn't chill my cake, by the way. Looking at that picture, making little divots so that it gives the impression that it's an actual grad cap that somebody's wearing. And I know they seem very random, but I am looking at the picture. In the end, it ends up looking like a funny old man. But it worked. Once I painted it and I got the top on the cap, it actually worked out. I was a little nervous, I'm not gonna lie. I was nervous at first, but he turned out he turned out pretty good in the end. Okay, so this next part is making the actual the top part of the grad cap. We're going to use this 8-inch square cake card. Okay, that is going to help us to not have to worry about this thing going floppy on us. And you can just use regular fondant if you want. I actually made this the day before I made the rest of the cake. Okay, so I recommend that so that your fondant can kind of set a little bit for you because when you put the tassel on, it's nice if the fondant isn't totally just fresh. But really, if you're in a pinch, you could totally make this after you've done the rest of the cake because we're using that cardboard cake card. Okay, so I rolled out my fondant. I got rid of the air bubbles with my little acupuncture needle, and I am rubbing some water onto my fondant. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was a total idiot here. I was a total idiot. Sometimes I'm just not using my brain. What you should just do. I don't know why I did it this way. I was thinking it would be easier, but I forgot that I wanted to cover the edges of this cake card as well. So this is just really dumb. I was going to put my I wet it with water, the top of the fondant there, and then put my cake card on. And then I was going to cut around it and be done and then flip it over. But that was really dumb because I actually needed to cover the sides as well, right? So just don't do it this way. Now I have to kind of get my hand under and flip it over, which was totally fine. It was not a big deal. But just put your cake card down. Um, you can wet the cake card itself and then flip your fondant over top of it, and you'll be just fine. Just do it the normal way. Don't be a weirdo like me. Okay, so I now have flipped it over and I've got my my hands running along the sides of it, okay, because we want to cover those edges there. We don't want to see that cardboard at all. Using my acupuncture needle again to get out any air bubbles. I'm using my hand to just kind of rub along the side so I can get that nice square, really nice and square edges. And I'm even using my quilting ruler here, which if you don't have one, you absolutely need one in your life. I use it for every single cake project. And I'm just rubbing that along the edges as well to further define that nice solid square that you get on a grad cap. Okay, so I did that on all four sides, and then I'm going to take my pizza cutter and hold that quilting ruler up along the edge. Now, again, we've just covered the edges, right? So don't cut them off here. Make sure you're not cutting off the covered edges. We want them to still be covered, so cut next to the edge, right? Don't just run it along the cardboard, otherwise you will cut off the actual edge, okay? And powdered sugar just so things don't get sticky on me here, using my ruler to kind of shape up those edges, and then any sort of straight edge you can just kind of run along the bottom edges there, the bottom at an angle along the bottom edges, and that will shape up those edges for you as well. Super easy for that part. Um, I have made grad caps before not using cardboard, and you can make them out of pastillage, I pronounce it, but I don't recommend it. You might as well just use a cake card, okay? It was remember, the cake was 6-inch round hemisphere. The cake card was an 8-inch cake card, okay? So 2 inches wider, obviously square, but just keep that in mind. Okay, so now I am using some neon blue fawn dust, and I am also using this edible hybrid sparkle dust in this sparkle dust pump, royal blue. Both of these are by Roxy and Rich, and they're both edible, which is awesome. Not that, that's a big deal all of the time, but for a cake like this, I'm actually going to be making a paint out of this and painting my grad cap. And I just wanted to show you this paint because it really is, it gives you an amazing finish because it's so pigmented, because that fawn dust is so pigmented. It wasn't necessarily created to be a paint. It was more created to color fondant with by mixing into the fondant. I'm also using my diesel here, which is like Everclear, 190 proof, which is what we want when we are creating a paint mixture. But I used equal parts of the fawn dust and the sparkle dust, and and then I just put a little bit of Everclear in, and you really don't even have to measure the Everclear. I used a half teaspoon of each, the fond dust and the sparkle dust. And then I just put a little Everclear in, and I've got this kind of thin, actually, paint consistency. But because the fond dust is so pigmented, it's okay that the consistency of the paint is thin because you still get really, really good coverage. Do you see this? And that sparkle dust, I love adding that because it gives this slight sparkle. It's subtle, but it's beautiful. And you cannot see it well on camera at all, which drives me nuts. But you can see it great in person. So it gives you, and then when you brush it on with a pastry brush like this, you want to, I'm just trying to get the edges first. Make sure you've gotten the edges because you can see I've missed some sections of the edges here. I have to go back over it. But once you do the top, you want to paint it all in one direction. And see the coverage on that? It's beautiful. I didn't have to do two coats or anything. One coat was perfect. It did the trick. And you can't see it well on camera again, but it has such a very cool, beautiful sparkle to it as well. Um, I did this same idea for a deep purple finish I got on a cake tier over on the Cakeheads website. I used fond dust and a sparkle dust in purple, and it just came out beautiful. So that's a little trick to getting a beautiful painted finish when you're using Roxy and Rich's products. Fond dust is just a beautiful product to use for painting. Okay, so now, the Everclear will evaporate on you quickly. So I just left what was in what I had originally mixed together. The Everclear had evaporated a little on me by the time I was done with that top part of the grad cap, and I just added a little bit more Everclear to it. I didn't even have to add any more of the dusts at all, and added a little more Everclear and was able to, again, paint this on and get a beautiful full coverage finish. I don't have to worry about brush strokes. I mean, you do want to make sure that you're brushing all in the same direction, which I did not start doing here on this one, but I end up doing by the end here. But you can just see how beautifully this paints on. So I covered the whole thing first, and then I went over it from side to side. Not yet, not yet. To get the brush strokes to all be going in the same direction. You'll see me do that in a moment. But you know, they have Roxy and Rich has so many fond dust colors that you can mix with their sparkle dusts that will just give you a beautiful, beautiful finish like this. So definitely check out their line of fond dusts because I have even more that I want to do. I'm excited about. Okay, so this is where I start brushing all in the same direction just to make sure that all the brush strokes are kind of going the same direction. And it kind of gives this kind of linen-y look as well in the end. Again, it's just beautiful full coverage, tiny bit of sparkle. I wish you could see better on camera. And that was how I colored this grad cake. Okay, so this is what it looks like dry. Again, you can only see the sparkle a tiny bit here on camera, but you can see how it kind of has a little bit of a linen look finish to it. Yeah, just really great. I'm kind of in love with painting cakes this way. All right, so it is finished. Well, it's mostly finished. Not totally finished. We still have to make the tassel. But when you want to put it on another cake tier, you just want to make sure you support it. I only use 4 bubble tea straws in a cross pattern underneath where I'm going to put the grad cap. And again, this was a cake for my daughter for her graduation. So this was the top tier. So I've got my bubble tea straws in. I'm just making the fondant a little sticky with a clean paper towel. I'm rubbing that has a little water on it and rubbing it on there so that my grad cap tier will stick to it. You could also use buttercream. You could use royal icing. Using my hamburger flipper to pick up my grad cap. And it's actually the same size as the tier underneath it as far as the diameter, so 6 inch. That tier underneath is a 6 inch round tier, and this is a 6 inch hemisphere. So I just lined it up basically with the tier underneath it. So that seam is in the middle. And then um, I'm going to add some supports and this as well. And now this might be overkill. You might not need to do this, but I'm going to put obviously that cardboard top on that we created, and then I'm going to put a tassel on top of that, and I just didn't want it to push down on my grad cap cake part too much. So I added 3 bubble tea straws in. I measured them so they're the right height. They're sticking out just a tiny, tiny bit. They're mostly sunk into the cake so that you won't see them once I put this on. And I just put them right next to each other in, 3 of them. And that just made me feel better about not having too much weight pushing down on the cake. And then I just added a little water around them so that which does ruin the paint job. So be careful. Don't make that too wide, that circle of water. And then I just placed the cardboard on top. And once it dried, it stuck very nicely. I actually transported this cake and everything, and nothing moved, so all was well. So that is the grad cap portion, and now we just have to make the tassel. So one thing I want to note, make this ahead of time out of gum paste and let it dry in position on the same size board. Like get an extra board and make this tassel out of gum paste, put it into the position that you're going to have it on the real cake board top that you made, and let it dry that way a little bit. Make it ahead of time, maybe the day before. Because I made mine out of fondant, it stretched on me after I put it on my grad cap. So that's what I'm trying to help you avoid. Okay, so this is how I made it. I rolled out a piece like so. And, you can make it a little bit longer than it really needs to be, but, the general size of a tassel. And I started cutting tiny little strips. Okay, those are going to be the little fabric, tassel pieces. Make sure you cut all the way through. I didn't cut mine all the way through and that was a problem, but just little tiny strips all the way from one end to the other. Okay, and then I eyeballed this. I didn't really measure out how big or how tall it is. I just, kind of went off memory. You can look at a picture of a real tassel online if you want. Um, and I folded over that top edge. So I was kind of just winging this as I went to see how it would turn out, and I was happy with it in the end. This was kind of a lazy way to make a tassel. I folded over the top and then I added some water and kind of rubbed that water in so it would get sticky. And then I started rolling over one edge. Now, because I didn't cut my pieces all the way through, you can see there's kind of like flat chunks there. But if you actually cut all your pieces through, you'll be totally fine and won't have to go back over them to then cut them fully again, which I had to do later. But yeah, so I just kind of rolled it in on itself and then kind of, pushed at the top a little bit so it looked rounded the way it was supposed to. And then I kind of made a little divot towards the top there with my fingers right there. And I used the back end of my scalpel and kind of pushed it in, not all the way through, these little kind of lines to make it look like that little silver bracket that holds that section together, right? Just kind of lines next to each other, just kind of pushed them in and rolled it as I went, and that created that little like bracket look on there. Super, super easy way to create a tassel. Super, super easy way. Again, if you make this out of gum paste and you lay it in the position it's going to be on the cake and let it dry, then you won't have to worry about it stretching out on you. But mine did stretch out on me later on. It was a little bit of a problem. Okay, now I rolled out these 2 extra little strips of the fondant, and I just take them in my hands and I just kind of start twisting. I'm holding one side while twisting the other, and this gives me a little bit of a rope look, like on a piece of fabric. Super easy way to do that. And I rolled out 2, but I actually only needed 1 in the end. So, because it was a lot longer than I really realized that I needed. Then I just rolled out another little piece of the fondant in my hands to create a ball. Again, I eyeballed this. And then I held it between my fingers like that and rolled it, and then just kind of pushed down on it to flatten it a little bit. And that's going to be the little top knob on top of the cap. And just one of these strips will go around that knob, you'll see as we put it on. I thought I needed two, but I really only needed one. So you actually don't have to fuse these together. You'll be fine with just the ones as long as you made it long enough. You actually don't need it to be super long. But you can see I just used a little water, added my little knob, and then just laid down the little rope around it. Once you get it into place, you can add just a little touch of water to the bottom of the rope so that it will stay place on the board. And then I added my tassel. I put a little bit of water underneath, and actually this is where I ran into my problem. Because I just made it fresh out of gum paste, it started, because it's hanging over the edge like that, it started to stretch on me and was ruining my little silver bracket, which, by the way, I painted that silver with the silver paint. You could use highlighter dust mixed with vodka or edible art silver paint, or whatever you want to use to paint that. Um, and that was it. So if you have it drying like that on, if you make it out of gum paste the day before and have it drying like that on a separate board, then you can just transfer it over onto your board when you're ready and it's all dry and it won't stretch out on you. That's it. That's how you make the grad cap cake. If you want to see how I made the vanity part of this cake, the girl and the vanity and the book tier on the bottom, come on over to Cakeheads and join our crew over there. When you become a member, you get access to all the tutorials on the website and to the Cakeheads group, community group. We have beginners, we have intermediate level, we have advanced cake artists, and we are all there helping each other, sharing our experiences, learning new things together every day, and having a ton of fun together. So come and join us. We'd love to have you part of the Cakeheads family. Thanks for watching. See you later.